I forget to hit record and everybody can just listen to me talk about daycare stories. What time is it? 5:03. So we'll give it like 2 more minutes here and see if we have anybody else sign on. But yeah, both my mom and Tim's mom both did in-home daycare when we were growing up. So it was like, felt very normal, or very like, it felt more normal to us for her to be in an in-home daycare than a center. And I know some people are the opposites. They are like, no, we're not doing in-home. Like, we want them in a center with like lots of people around and stuff like that. I'm like, oh, I don't want that.
I couldn't do it when she was little like that. It made me cry.
At a center?
Yeah, I just couldn't imagine having all those people when they were little.
We toured one place, and I'll just like never forget. We're like walking down the hallway, and they're like the glass walls. You can see like they're like animals in a zoo or something like that. And just like, she's like, oh, and this is the infant room where Murray will be. And there's like, it felt like 30 babies, even though I'm sure it was like 10, 15 babies, but they're all, I mean, they were all crying. They're all in like little high chairs right in front of the glass window. And I was like, I just looked at Tim and I was like, I can't do that. Like, no judgment. I'm just like, that's just not.
Right. It was easier to take her to a center when she was older, and then you had more interaction. I thought that was good then. But
especially when it's like more helpful for them to be interacting with like lots of kids and learning, where there's more like educational piece to it and stuff like that. But like, so I'm glad that we found where we were, because she's the only baby there. This lady will only take one baby at a time. So like Murray gets just coddled, and which I love, and they all love her, and they just, so it's fun.
That's fun.
But see if anything is in the Facebook group here, and I'll get started. Okay. Oh, I might, well, for those who are watching this live, and then for those of you who are going to watch the recording of this, I might switch next week's Zoom call to Sunday instead of Monday. I have something that I wanted to go to on Monday evening, but I'm not sure yet. I'm still figuring that out. But I will let you guys know. It will be the same time. It'll just be switch days. I'm really tired though, so you guys are gonna have to bear with me on this one. It was Murray wanted to party last night again. The girl she's nocturnal lately. And I started watching, if you guys want a show recommendation, on Apple, if you have Apple, the show Shrinking.
Oh, is that good?
Yes, with Jason Segel and Harrison Ford, I think. We watched an episode last night. So Murray goes to bed around like 7:30, and I follow her very shortly after, because like for me it's accumulating as much sleep as I can, because I know I'm gonna have to get up a couple times throughout the night. But I started playing one of those episodes, and then I could not turn it off, so we're up to like 9, and 9 is a stretch for me. Like, I've got like an hour of sleep under my belt by 9 p.m. But it was hilarious. Like, I could not stop laughing at the show. Some of it might be sleep deprivation, that I thought it was so funny. But I was like, Tim, how are you not just like cracking up? It's just like that, like dry, vague, like dumb humor that you just like can't help but giggle. And I think Jason Segel is just really funny too. So it was just, just funny. But so let's get into it, guys. Let's get into it. Week four, the carb talk. We're going to have the carb talk. Everybody wants to have the carb talk. Everybody's got lots of questions about carbs. So we got to have the carb talk. It's crazy though. We're halfway done with the program already. I tell you, if you have done the reset before, or you haven't done the reset before, everybody always thinks 6 weeks sounds really long. And I'm like, it doesn't. It goes by so quick. I actually might make this into a 30-day thing. Don't mark my words on that yet, but I might switch up the format a little bit different moving forward, and I might do a couple. So it'd be 30 days, but I might do like a couple Zoom calls a week, but they're going to be short, like 25 minutes short.
We'll see.
Yeah. You know how I work on that. But that's always my goal. I'm going to try to do it tonight. We'll see. But I might, instead of Zoom calls, I might just do like the Facebook Live and then just stream it into, I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud, but I might just switch it up a little bit and see how it goes from 30 days to 6 weeks instead. But anyways, halfway done the program. After this week's contents about fuel sources, we're actually going to kind of move away from food, and we're going to talk about the other cool things, like the boring stuff. Maybe this has all been boring. I don't know. The other boring stuff like sleep and sunlight and movement and exercise, some of those other big needle movers when we're talking about overall health and metabolic health. But let's recap here, since I am talking about fuel systems and our metabolism is our fuel system, I want to talk about what it is again. So what is metabolism? Often, I feel like in the health and wellness industry space, often we look at metabolism as this like perfect little calculator, right? Something that we just enter our arbitrary numbers in, and people follow their arbitrary numbers and hope for the best. Thinking that every day, if they eat the exact amount of food and they move the exact, you're going to get this perfect little outcome. And for most people who've tried to do that, they know it does not work, or it works for a little bit and it doesn't work. And this is my disclaimer. If it worked for a little bit and then it stopped working, it didn't work. That's my feedback to you guys. We often look at the metabolism as something that's like fast or slow, or something that determines if we lose or gain weight. It's our fuel partitioning system, right? It determines how fuel is used in the body. Fuel and energy are two different things, even though I sometimes use them interchangeably. Fuel, I consider, is like what we eat, our food, okay? Fuel is what we eat, what we consume, and that's converted in our cells into usable energy by the body. The human body can get energy from two things. We get energy from food, and we get energy from the sun, the big yellow thing in the sky that everybody wants to run away from and cover themselves up. We actually derive energy from the sun. We have been for 2.5 million years at this point, even though we've definitely fear-mongered it in the later days. But that's for a different conversation. That comes later in the reset. But this is why I don't want people to fear food. This fear thing that we have around eating and food. It's like literally what we have to provide our body fuel to be able to function throughout the day. So stay with me here while I kind of go into the weeds with a little biochemistry stuff as we talk about how our body uses different fuel systems. This can get a little confusing, so don't feel like you need to like understand this all the first time, or if you're like, I have no idea what the hell she's talking about, that's okay. This is why several people join the reset several different times, because sometimes we just need to keep hearing information and just and it takes a little while to stick. But I am a staunch advocate on educating people about how things work, the how, like why am I asking you to do these things? Because I think if people understand the why, they're more prone to the behavior change. They're more prone to sticking with it, to continuing kind of the methodology that I'm teaching you guys, versus me just telling you like, hey, I want you to do this and this, and then not telling you why. You know, that's not a lot of buy-in for people. So everybody has several fuel pathways, right? Our bodies can use different fuels at different times of the day, all depending on what we're doing, or depending on what the demand is. If our body detects that we're moving slow, right? Just like we're meandering around, we're chilling, we're just kind of moving throughout our day, our body will use fat because it's a slow burning fuel, okay? Fat is a slow burning fuel. if our body detects that we're like ramping it up in our environment, right? Maybe we like all of a sudden started running, or maybe we're doing a workout or something like that. Your body will start looking for glucose, for sugar, to support that endeavor. This is metabolic flexibility. This is like the whole overarching theory behind my programming, behind kind of what I teach. It's metabolic flexibility is that you can seamlessly switch between fuel systems in the body, right? At any given time. No fuel is bad per se. There's just some that are a little bit better to be running on our bodies, running our bodies on most of the time. We don't want to be stuck in one fuel burning paradigm, okay? So it's really important to have this kind of metabolic flexibility piece. It's our metabolism is much more than it just being fast or slow, right? Our metabolism determines our body composition, like how we hold body fat, how we lose body fat, our energy, our mood, our hunger, our mental clarity, our libido. Like literally, our metabolism is everything. So it's pretty important that we have a woke metabolism. It's funny because if I was doing this talk with you guys in the early 2000s, I would probably be having the fat talk with you guys, right? Like the era of the low fat, time. I was the queen of eating low fat, though. If I do toot my horn on that one, I was a pretty good dieter during those things. I would like challenge myself about how less of fat I could eat in one day. It was terrible, but now here we are, 20 years later, and the pendulum has swung to the other side, and we live in a world where we've kind of demonized carbohydrates, or we kind of live in that low carb, zero carb world. I want you guys to find your happy medium with this. Some folks like carbs more, some folks like fat more. You know what I mean? Some of this is just down to personal preference. What we're doing here, what you and I are doing here, is we're prioritizing protein over both of those. I was thinking of it like a dress. Or if you're a guy, you can just think about it as like your outfit, right? Like the dress, but I'm going to use the analogy of the dress. The dress is like your protein, right? And like carbs and fat are like the accessories, like what else you would put on here to just kind of accessorize your outfit. Okay. So it's like a lot of that just comes from personal preference, assuming you're always prioritizing protein. And it's funny because and somebody commented in the group not too long ago about this, or maybe they had sent me a message. I can't really remember. But I've had several people, this is a declaration that I often get from clients, and they say, I just can't eat sugar. I just can't eat carbs because I overeat them. Okay. I get that statement all the time. And I have to dig a little bit more into that. And I'm just like, well, what are you eating? Like, let's hash this out. Like, what are you eating that you can't really stop, that you're overeating? And they're like, well, it's like donuts and like cookies and stuff like that. And it's like, yeah, well, those things are sugar, but they're also like hyper palatable. Like those things have that combination of a sugar, starch, fat, and salt. Did I miss that? That, those four things that make things very irresistible, that make things super hyper palatable. So it's just like, is it because it's a carb that you're overeating it, or is it because it's a highly processed food that you're overeating it? Because I don't see people overeating apples and like sweet potatoes and carrots and broccoli, of which all. Oh, hey, Maggie. Are you working? I can't hear you, but I'm assuming you're saying yes. But yeah, you don't find a lot of people. Oh, Tim got Marie up. I can hear her squawk. I don't hear a lot of people saying they're overeating apples and sweet potatoes and broccoli and blueberries, of which are carbohydrates as well. So it's like, I want to be just wary around that language when people say they can't have sugar because they overeat it. And it's like, well, no, you can't have processed junk because you overeat it, just like everybody else in the world. Like, welcome to being a human being. So that was your guys' intro. I hope you like that. Halfway done, and that was your intro. So let's dig into this a little bit more. I gave you guys the campfire analogy in your weekly lesson. If you read that from the content that came out on Saturday morning, it laid out what that campfire analogy looks like. I feel like that's a very simplified way to understand how fuels work in the human body. Hopefully that somewhat made sense to you guys. And if it didn't, that's okay. You might have to read it a couple times, and hopefully what I'm going to talk about tonight will help that make more sense. So there are 3 different human fuel systems, okay? In everybody's body. This is not just me. This is not just you guys because you're in the reset. This is how everybody's metabolism works. We have 3 fuel systems. We have sugar, carbs, glucose. I mean, literally you can use all 3 of them interchangeably. I'm sure everybody's heard of that before. So we have like the free sugar that's floating around in our blood. We have stored sugar, which is called glycogen. We store that in our liver and our muscles. We have fat, right? That is another fuel source for the human body. And that comes in like the free fatty acids or the fat that everybody wants to take off their body, stored fat, body fat. And then we have ketones. Okay, so sugar, fat, ketones are the 3 human fuel systems. Ketones are a byproduct of fat metabolism. So when our body burns fat for energy, I think of it as a tadpole, and this is a really weird analogy as well. And I don't know why I think of it like this, but I do. Like if a piece of fat, a fat molecule, looked like a little tadpole, right? You have like the little face part and then the little tail. Like the little tail that breaks off would be the ketone, okay? So we can use all 3 of those in a perfect world. Protein, we've talked about protein. We talked a lot about protein last week. Protein really isn't a fuel for the human body. Even though a lot of people talk like it is, we don't derive energy from protein per se. But we need protein for a lot of things. Like we talked about last week, that's where we get our nourishment. That's where our cells get the nourishment from those amino acids that we get from protein. That's what keeps us satiated. That's what keeps us full, those kind of things. So we need protein, but we don't derive energy from it. We get energy from the sugar or the fat or the ketones. So campfire 1. I'll just quickly go over the campfire analogy. Campfire 1, this was the fire that was made with the twigs and the kindling, right? The little pieces of scraps that you just keep throwing on the bonfire. It's fairly easy to keep throwing stuff on your fire to keep it from burning out, but it's tedious, right? It takes a lot of work. You can't move away from that fire for too long, otherwise it's going to go out. You kind of have to sit by it. You have to keep throwing twigs on it to keep it from going because kindling burns fast. This fire is hard work, right? If you had to choose to sit by one of these campfires, you're out camping. This fire is hard work because you constantly have to do that tending to it, and you constantly have to scavenge to replenish the twigs to keep the fire going, okay? Carbohydrates are your comparison to what the kindling fire is, okay? Carbohydrates are your kindling fire. They're your fast fuels. Get comfortable with that language. Fast fuels, carbohydrates, slow fuels, fat ketones, okay? Carbs break down in your body is sugar. I think everybody knows that, right? And if you don't, there's nothing wrong with that. All carbohydrates break down in your body is sugar. And when that sugar enters your bloodstream, your cells can quickly take it up. Okay, your cells just like gobble that sugar up, and then it gets pushed into your cells, and your cells spin it around and make energy from it. Okay. That's a very oversimplified definition of how that works, but just to give you a little bit of an image, you'll have to regularly eat carbohydrates and you have to regularly eat snacks just to keep those blood sugars levels happy and your energy up. I think everyone can kind of relate to feeling this, like what's the word I'm looking for? The folks that get hangry. We've all heard of hangry, right? Because we've got like a ton of commercials and memes making fun of people who get hangry. I just want everybody to know getting hangry is not normal. Hunger should not feel that urgent, like to the point where you feel like you're going to eat your arm if you don't get to food. That is not how hunger should show up in our body. It should be relatively calm. But yeah, so the folks that feel like they get hangry, the folks that feel like you're constantly eating, that you're constantly hungry, you're just never really satiated, you can't really go more than a couple hours without eating food, you have low energy, or you just kind of have inconsistent energy throughout the day, just like lots of ups and downs with that. maybe you're starting to kind of crave sugary, carb dense kind of foods. It just kind of feels like you're never on top of your hunger, right? You're always just kind of chasing your hunger throughout the day. That hunger is essentially controlling you. Many people today rely solely on fast fuels, rely solely on sugar, right? They're sugar burners. If you're running your body on carbohydrates day in and day out, it's going to take some effort. It takes a lot of work because you kind of have to be ahead of the game, and you're probably going to be eating and grazing more often than not. You probably have to do a lot of planning around your food consumption, emergency snacks, so you don't get too far away from food at any given time. That's no life to live. That is no life. I don't want that for you guys. I don't want that for you guys. So fast fuels, sugar is not always a bad thing. Good question. I'll answer that. I think I actually might answer that a little bit later in there. Good question though. Fast fuel isn't necessarily a bad thing. I don't want to give anybody, I'm not here to demonize that. Maybe you have to like run and catch a bus, or maybe you have a high intensity workout, something that is a high energy output that you need to do. From an evolutionary perspective, fast fuels were super important when we had to run to avoid getting killed, or we had to run in order to kill our food, right? We would have to ramp up our movement, and we'd probably have to sprint. And those situations when we need that quick burst of energy, our bodies can dump some sugar into our blood to kind of fuel, to support that activity. And then we can tap back into our fat burning mode when we're done moving like that, when we're back to just kind of like the low and slow kind of moving through life, okay? If you're a heavy, weightlifting sessions or an elite level athlete, those folks might benefit from fueling from carbohydrates strategically. But the general person, and I'm making an assumption because I don't know all of you, but I'm going to guess nobody here is an elite level athlete. I don't know. I don't mean to. I'm sorry if you are. You're probably in the wrong program. But for the general fitness enthusiast that I think most of us are, we probably don't need to put extra focus on fueling around our workouts or anything like that. What we eat during the day, assuming we're getting adequate protein and stuff like that, is probably enough to support your workouts. So yeah, if you're a high performance kind of person, you might need to put a little bit more effort into that to replenish your glycogen stores and all of that stuff. But we're not those folks, generally speaking. And besides, that kind of falls into the sports nutrition category. And I think for a lot of people, that just muddies the water. It just makes it even more difficult to understand what we're supposed to eat. Because now it's like, oh, do I need to eat this at this time? I need to eat carbohydrates before or after my workout. What should I eat during my workout? And it's like, we probably don't need any of that. And don't get me wrong, I love working out to my detriment sometimes. I can very easily overdo it. But I still don't need to. I still don't need to do anything funky with my food, for the most part, when it comes to my fitness. That was campfire 1. Campfire 1, kindling, carbohydrates. Campfire 2. This fire is made up of logs. Think of big birch logs. And logs burn for hours, right? You know that you throw a log on a fire and you can sit back and chill, and you probably don't need to tend to it for a while because it keeps going. You don't have to worry about endlessly scavenging for those little twigs to throw on because the log's good. It's got you. It might be labor intensive in the first part, right? Because you have to go gather up all your big logs and put them on. But once you do that, you can just kind of ride the wave of the nice campfire, right? We don't have to do much to it. So I'm trying to think where I want to go with that. So ketones and fats are your log fire, okay? And this is where I group protein in, but only because protein usually comes with, when we're talking about what's on your plate anyways, protein naturally comes with fat, right? So I kind of group them together. These are our slow fuels, right? Fat, ketone, slow fuels, carbohydrates, fast fuels. These are the fuels that burn. These are the fuels that burn long and slow. They're more reliable. They're a more reliable source of fuel for our bodies to run on. That's what's going to kind of provide that endless, predictable energy the entire day. That's what's going to provide. If you guys have probably noticed, if you're buckling down to your protein first meal of the day, you've probably noticed like shit. Like I can sit and ham down on some protein, and I'm not hungry for 3, 4, 5, however many hours. Like there's no right or wrong answer to that, but you've probably noticed that your hunger when you eat a substantial amount of protein is not there, because that's kind of tied in with the slow fuels, because it's fat. Okay. So when we focus on the log fire, that's when our hunger is kind of at bay. This is when we can, our food is an afterthought. It's no longer has to be on your the front of your brain, where you're thinking about food the entire day, and you're thinking about like, oh, well, what am I going to eat next? I'm going to be hungry in 2 hours. You don't really have to do that anymore when we kind of focus on, campfire too. So you guys should see my notes right now. It looks like a 5-year-old wrote these. Like I literally can't even read my own notes. I should improve on that. So the slow fuels is what we want to run our body on most of the day. Okay. Most of the day, not all the time. And then we can tap into campfire 1. We can tap into the fast fuels when we need it. Okay. Like when we're exercising, or you miss the bus and you have to run after it, or you have kids and maybe you need to run after them, and that's kind of a high energy or a high output activity that you're doing, right? But we want to be living most of our life kind of in that fat burning mode. So since fat and ketones are campfire 2, unlike sugar, we can keep infinite amounts. I can't even tell you how much of fat on our bodies in storage. Okay. Sugar has a limited capacity. So sugar, at any given time, we have about 2,000 calories worth of sugar on our body. Okay. That's stored in our liver. That's floating around in our blood. That's in our muscles. Okay. 2,000. That sounds like a lot, but that's not a lot at all. Fat, we have tens of thousands worth of calories on our body for us. Even the leanest person in the world still has tens of thousands worth of calories of stored fat on their body. Okay. Whether that's just like fat floating around, whether that's fat in the form of body fat, we all have a lot of it. I mean, our capacity to store fat is amazing. From an evolutionary perspective, that is the reason that humans are still here. Like, I know everybody wants to get rid of their body fat, but we should also appreciate it, because that is what has kept us alive. Because in times when food was scarce, guess what we had accessible to us to eat? Our bodies could literally just snack on themselves. How cool is that? It could tap into our stored body fat, and that's how we stayed alive. Like we don't need to worry about those kind of extremes these days anymore, but that's still how our body is hardwired to work. So I think that's just something to gnaw on there for a moment. And okay, I talked about ketones a little bit, what ketones are, right? That byproduct of fat metabolism. So when our body starts burning fat for energy and the fat little chunk breaks off, ketone is a part of that, okay? Because, keto has been a popular thing in the industry as well. So I just wanted to, I'm talking about 2 different things, okay? Keto, like the keto diet, this is just a ketone, which is just an energy source, okay? So our brains can use sugar, okay? Well, this is what usually happens. So sugar, just point blank, isn't a good source to be running our bodies on all the time, okay? Our lifestyles aren't really high output enough to be needing that all the time. Like most Americans, we live pretty slow lives. It might not feel like it. I feel stressed all the time. It doesn't feel like my life is slow. But as far as what we do throughout the day, right? Like think of it. You wake up in the morning, you meander around your house, you get ready, you go sit in a car, you drive to work. You go to work and you probably sit more at work, right? You get back into your car, you drive home, maybe you go and exercise for an hour, but in the grand scheme of things, we're just kind of thinking and doing throughout the day. It's relatively low output. So those activities don't require quick energy. They don't require fast fuels. Okay, that's why we don't want to be relying on those throughout the day, because we simply don't need them. Let's hash out the basics here. Really, 5:35. I'm doing good, guys. I'm like, nailed it. I probably should have started with this, actually. That would have been helpful. I didn't even talk like, what is a carb? Sorry, guys. I skipped that part. So let's hash out the basics here really quick. What is a carb? Carbs are sugar. All carbs break down in the body as sugar. From your food list, okay? Fruits, vegetables are all carbohydrates, okay? A piece of broccoli and a potato are both vegetables, right? One's just a starchy vegetable. They're still both carbohydrates, right? They both break down in our body as sugar. Grains, the thing that I asked you guys to have to break down, are also a carbohydrate source. So you might notice that your carb intake just naturally kind of went down, just, organically, because we tapped the brake on grains. But we remove those because of those anti-nutrients, right? Not because it's the carbohydrates. Protein, so that's the meat, the eggs, the fish, the poultry, that's on your food list. Those are all protein sources. And then like the nuts and the seeds, and the dairy, that gets a little iffy, right? Because, dairy has some protein in it, dairy has some carbohydrate in it, and nuts and seeds have some carbohydrate, and they also have fat. I qualify as nuts and seeds as a fat. They're predominantly a fat source, most of them. But that's just a little breakdown of what fat, carbs, and protein are. You guys might have heard this theory rolling around, right? That carbohydrates are our main source of fuel, right? Have you guys heard that? People like to talk like our bodies need sugar. Like sugar is our main source of fuel for the human body. That's not true. That's not true. And I'll argue with anybody so I'm blue in the face on that one. Fat is. Carbohydrates are a source of fuel. Again, nothing wrong. It's not a bad source of fuel, but it's not our main one. It's not what we want to be running our bodies on day in and day out. People say this for really two reasons, that carbs are our body's main source of fuel. One, if you guys have heard of the blood-brain barrier, so like there's only certain molecules that can pass our blood-brain barrier and go into our brain, which is a protective thing. We don't want a bunch of weird stuff going into our brain, meaning that sugar can cross that blood-brain. Ooh, guys, this is my sleep catching up to me. Sugar can cross that blood-brain barrier. That's important, right? Because you think, well, like my brain needs energy, so I need to eat that sugar so my brain gets energy. That is important, but guess what? Ketones also fuel your brain too. That's something that people don't talk about a lot. You can run your brain. You don't need to run your brain on sugar. You can run your brain on ketones as well. And then the second reason why we kind of have that theory is this concept around sugar being our preferential, right? People throw that out. Sugar is preferential to our bodies. Our bodies prefer sugar, okay? It's because sugar is an easy fuel for the body to use, okay? Like we just talked about, right? Sugar is a fast fuel. It could not be easier for our cells to use. Our cells have to do relatively little work to derive energy from sugar. Our cells have to do a little bit more work. There's a few more processes that happen for our cells to derive energy from fat. But just because something is preferential doesn't mean it's the best, okay? We somehow started using preferential means that it's the best source of fuel for your human body, and it's not. It's just preferred because if there's sugar available for your body to use, it's going to use that first, okay? it's, think of it like your body's going to take the path of least resistance, okay? And that is sugar. So if we're constantly eating a diet that is high in that food that we just continuously giving our body that sugar to use as fuel, why would our body have any other incentive to tap into fat or ketones for fuel, right? Because it has that steady stream of sugar coming in that it can derive energy from. But we just talked about, for most people, that doesn't feel very good, right? Because we get low on energy, we get the hangry, we get the cravings, we get all these sorts of things. So here's the thing. All body fat is, right, for people who have fat loss efforts, all body fat is stored, literally stored fuel, stored energy that's waiting to be used, that's waiting to be converted into fuel for our body to use. That's how body fat is lost. Did you guys actually know you breathe it out? Isn't that, like, Google it, like, because when we talk about like burning body fat, like, what's the image that comes to your head? Like your little fat cells are just like on fire and they just like disintegrate or something like that. That's not, like, we actually breathe it out. It's this crazy. Hold on. I don't want to speak wrong to this. Hold on. We have to pause this whole thing here so I can Google here for a second. Breathe out body. Because I always say these two words wrong. Carbon dioxide. There we go. Because I always want to say not carbon dioxide. I don't know. There's some other substance that I always want to say for that. But that's what we do. We actually, like, when that body fat burns, okay, we actually breathe it out through carbon dioxide. So I think that's kind of interesting. Not a lot of people know that. Now I lost where I was because I'm sitting here Googling the correct words. Hold the phone, guys. I'm just reading a couple things to see where I want to go with this. Body fat. That's what I was talking about, body fat. So again, all body fat is just stored energy that's waiting to be liberated. Okay, we're really good at taking things in. We're not really good at letting things out. The person can look down and they can be like, oh shit, like I've got fat storage. Like, why is my body not using this for energy? Like, I've got fat that can go away, that can be liberated and breathed out while I sleep or whatever. Like, why is my body not tapping into that stored fat? This is because the sugar, it goes back to the sugar thing. The sugar's easy. Your body has simply forgotten how to use other fuel systems. It's simply forgotten how to use fat and ketones, and it's heavily relying on sugar. So when we're eating diets that are high in sugar, our bodies just get very, very comfortable with that fuel source. So our cells get used to using it for energy and always have ample access to it. So it doesn't really have any incentive to tap into your stored body fat for fuel, okay? Fat and ketones kind of get forgotten. They get inaccessible to use for energy. And that's kind of why we start accumulating body fat in the first place. That's kind of like the cause and effect from that. So I'm not telling anybody to eat a high fat diet. I'm not telling anybody to eat a low carb diet per se. I do want to make that clear. I'm just talking about the fat that is stored on your body and how to access it, right? We're not removing all sugar from our diets. I know there's been lots of questions. We talked a little bit about it last week too, just like having a little sugar in the coffee and stuff like that. That stuff, who cares, right? We don't care about little amounts of that because we just talked about, like, our body can use sugar. Like, there's nothing wrong with that fuel. We just don't want to use it all the time. So there's plenty of sugar left in our diets, right? When we remove grains, we have fruits and we have the vegetables. We have the starchier vegetables like the potatoes and the turnips. I don't know who eats turnips anymore, but that's one of them. Carrots, right? That's a starchier carbohydrate. And dairy, right? Because some dairy has carbohydrate in it. So we just remove the unnecessary, harmful source of carbohydrates, which are grain. Okay. Just by doing that and prioritizing protein, that is enough to start encouraging your body to start using fat as an energy source over sugar again. Okay. Most of the time. Again, we just don't want to be stuck in the sugar burning paradigm. It doesn't feel good, and we avoid this by prioritizing protein. Just like the other end of the spectrum, we don't want to be stuck in the ketogenic diet, right? We've heard of this a little bit. These folks are so low carb, zero carb, that they're stuck in a fat and ketone burning paradigm. We don't want either of those. We don't want to be stuck in the extremes, right? Because now their bodies are forgetting how to use sugar efficiently, right? And that's where a lot of people that have insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, that is your body being unable to use sugar as an energy source, right? Because you're becoming insulin resistant. So very quickly, I do want to talk about insulin because I do think it's important. Insulin is our master fuel hormone. Let's call it that, okay? Insulin is responsible for taking the fuel out of our blood and putting it into the cells, okay? So we eat something, it breaks down in our body, and then our body, our pancreas, detects that there's fuel floating around in our blood. So our pancreas secretes insulin. Insulin comes up and takes the fuel, takes the blood sugar, takes the sugar out of your blood and throws it into your cells so your cells can, shimmy it around and make energy out of it. For folks who are insulin resistant or folks who are type 2 diabetic, your cells, think of it like here's your cell and there's a door on your cell and insulin comes and shoves the fuel into the cell and the cell does something, right? So if you're insulin resistant or type 2 diabetic, your cell will no longer open, okay? Insulin is coming and it's got all this fuel and it's ready to go into the cell and the cell's like, no, man, we're full. We don't want any more sugar in this cell. So what happens, since the cell is closed, there's nowhere for this insulin. I'm using a lot of sign language today. I don't know what's going on here. Our cell, there's nowhere for the insulin to go, okay? There's nowhere for the insulin to go. There's nowhere for the fuel to go. So what happens is people start getting chronically elevated blood sugar levels, right? Because the blood sugar, the sugar can't get into the cells, but your body keeps detecting that it's in your body, so that it's in your bloodstream, so insulin keeps being secreted. So now we have chronically high blood sugar levels and we have chronically high insulin levels, and there's nowhere for them to go because the cells are like, oh, hell no, we're full. We don't want anything else. I hope you guys like my Muppet show there. I don't know what that was. That was the first time I think I've used so many hand signals to explain what insulin is. So insulin's great. We need insulin to be working how it should. But that's what happens when people get kind of stuck in this sugar burning paradigm. Not everybody is insulin resistant or type 2 diabetic. I'm just saying that can be a start to that. So yeah, we aren't avoiding fat, we're not avoiding carbs, nothing like that. We're just prioritizing protein over both of them. I don't want people to fear these things. I don't want, to take up too much mental space worrying about the nuance of macros. You simply don't need to worry about it that much. 5:48. All right, give me 5 more minutes. I can wrap this up. I want to talk about one more thing. The food fundamental number 4. That was at the bottom of your weekly content. Eat most of your food during the day. You guys are kind of already doing this. But just to recap, food fundamental 1 was eat meals when you get hungry. Stop snacking, hunker down to meals, eat to satiety, stop eating, and then do it again when you get hungry, okay? That was number 1. Number 2 was break fast like a king, right? Where your first meal of the day was your most substantial meal of the day, which was mostly protein, okay? Number 3 was prioritize protein. Every time you sit down for all your subsequent meals, still make sure that protein was the center of the show, the rock star, whatever you want to call it. And then that brings us to 4, food fundamental 4, eat most of your food during the day. This makes sense, hopefully. Okay, we just got to think about this for a second. Humans are diurnal creatures, right? That means we are awake during the day and we sleep at night. That is our sleep-wake cycle. I'm going into circadian rhythm stuff right now, but it's important, so follow me. We sleep at night, we're awake during the day. So it would make sense that we would be consuming our food when it's day out, when it's light out, when the sun's out, okay? and that we wouldn't be consuming our food when the sun goes down. Now, if you are a shift worker, I know one's on here right now, Miss Maggie, your poor little biology here. It is very difficult for people who do shift work because you're literally having to live upside down from your biology. There's ways to kind of biohack this, but just know that it gets exceptionally harder because you're literally living your life upside down, and it's just very tough on your body, your metabolism, and whatnot. So when we're awake, we're doing things, right? We're parenting, we're working, we're thinking, we're doing, we're exercising, we're just doing, right? We're living our day-to-day stuff. So we require energy to do that. That's why we want to be eating during the day. So from a circadian viewpoint, when we wake up in the morning, when your body senses that a new day is about to begin, because there's a shift in the light, before you guys can even detect that there's a shift in the light, your body knows that a new day is coming. A bunch of hormonal things start to happen. And one of them is insulin, okay? Insulin comes up and it's on standby and it's waiting, and that's, again, responsible for shuttling fuel into your cells. It's waiting for you to eat something so your body can use that fuel and turn it into energy, okay? It's like, that's what happens in the morning. You wake up, your cortisol comes up a little bit, your serotonin goes up a little bit, your melatonin. We're going to talk all about this next week, and it's like one of my favorite topics about circadian biology. All these hormonal things, and insulin comes to the show when you wake up, and it's ready. It is ready for you to give it some food so it can put that food to work. Insulin works very well during the first part of the day. Okay, it's super efficient at its job about getting fuel out of your blood and putting it into your cells and putting it to work. Super efficient. It's not so efficient later in the day, into the evening, into the night hours. It's just not as good at doing its job. So we want to make sure that we give it food to do its job in the first part of the day. That's another reason why we want to eat most of our food during the day. So this is the meal timing part of this, okay? This is called front load feeding. If anybody wants the more sciencey name of eat most of your food during the day, it's called front load feeding. You can Google it. I'm not making it up. It's in the circadian world. So this is what the rest of your meal timing is going to look like, okay? If you're trying to follow along to this. Think of an upside down cone, okay? We're bigger at the top or smaller at the bottom. We already started to do this because your break fast is your epic meal of the day. And that's the bigger part of the top. And then you'll notice your hunger might just be naturally showing up a little bit less and less and less and less as the day goes on. So your lunch, right? It just gets a little bit lighter. Okay. It doesn't mean like smaller. I don't want you to necessarily think like I need to put my lunch on a baby plate. Like that's not what I'm talking about. It just gets like a little bit lighter, right? Our first day, we have like so much nutrition, right? Like all those amino acids from the protein, like it's super nutrient dense. We're still prioritizing protein at every single meal down the cone, but they just become a little bit lighter. Like maybe that's where you have your salads and your soups and your scrambles and your stir fries and stuff like that's just a little bit like it's just a little bit lighter, more of your vegetables and your fruits. That's where those fast fuels, those carbohydrates, if you want to insert carbohydrates into your diet, doing it kind of in the middle of the day, your body would like that. That's a great time to eat those things. And then dinner, maybe we're just a little bit smaller. You still sit down with your family and eat dinner. We don't need to be a weirdo and be like, sit at the table drinking water and be like, I can't, Franny told me I can't eat for dinner. Like, don't be that fucking person. Don't be that person. Eat dinner with your family if you want to, but you just might not be as hungry. So you just naturally might not eat as much food. And then the very tip of the cone, like maybe that's your little snack. You know how I feel about snacks. That's not to say I never have a snack, let's be honest. But if you do have a snack, right, maybe it's just like a little bit lighter. Here's a tip. If you do eat before you go to bed, try to have it mostly a protein and fat, not a carbohydrate. And nothing against carbs. We often hear, like, if you eat carbs at night, you're going to get fat. It's nonsense. Don't believe that. But what will happen sometimes is it messes with your sleep. Okay. So we just talked about insulin, right? Carbohydrates produce the most insulin out of all macronutrients, right? It produces the most insulin response. So if insulin is present in your body, guess what cannot be present in your body? Melatonin. Melatonin is our sleep hormone. It makes us sleepy. So if you just like ate a big, like super carb heavy snack before you went to bed, insulin is going to come in, right? So if insulin's there and like melatonin is trying to come in, melatonin is going to see insulin and be like, oh, bye. I guess you're awake. Like, we're not getting ready for bed here. And it's gonna mess with your sleep. Long story short. So we don't want to do that. Yeah, so that's it. Eat most of your food during the day. It's funny because culturally we do this upside down, you guys, right? People try not to eat, and we have like wimpy little breakfast, right? We have like a banana or a little fucking yogurt, and then we don't eat, and then we have like a little bit more in the middle of the day, and then we have a ginormous dinner because we're starving, usually because we didn't eat all day, and then we just snack up until we go to bed, right? We are consuming most of our food in the later part of the day, and our body is like, what the hell is this human doing? Like, we don't have a need for this fuel right now, you know? And what happens when we give our body a lot of fuel and it's not asking for it, sometimes our body just shoves it into storage for a rainy day, and that's what we don't want. That's oversimplified. It does not mean like because you eat at night, all your food's going to go to storage, but it can happen because we should be winding down for the day, right? We should be kind of tapping into our rest and our digest and our chill mode, not stuffing our gorge. Just let me comment on these couple things. So, great question. And I think I kind of sputtered through some of that. Like, again, a banana, nothing wrong with a banana, right? It's a fruit, it's a carbohydrate. If you were doing something super high intensity that you really felt like you needed to fuel, like, there would be nothing wrong with eating a banana around your workout. But also know that it's probably not necessary for most people. Avoid cramping. So if you do, I would suggest electrolytes, trying electrolytes. Banana has like potassium, and potassium is one of our electrolytes, but it doesn't have all of our electrolytes. So that thing that I talked about a couple times, the elements, that's a great, like, so if you find that you're cramping during your workout, making sure that you're getting adequate electrolytes, that's a great way to do it. Probably better than eating a banana for the purpose of getting electrolyte. Does that make sense? Yes, from understanding about carb and sugar, I guess walking is better to burn fat than intense workout. Yes. And week 6, when we talk about exercise, I'm going to talk about this. It's funny because you see, like, think of the fitness industry. Sorry, guys, I'm going to wrap this up. I know I'm long-winded here. In the fitness industry, we see all these, like, workouts, like do this fat burning exercise, or like, do this and we're going to torch away your body fat. We get rid of body fat from food, okay? Not from exercise. We don't actually burn body fat from exercise, which I think is really hard for a lot of people to wrap our heads around, because that's not what we've been told, right? We lose weight, we lose body fat from our diet, mostly. Exercise is great, right? It's great for physical strength. It's great for tons and tons of shit. But losing body fat, exercise really isn't that great, because a lot of the intense workouts, guess what fuel system they call on? They call on sugar, right? They don't call on fat, they call on sugar. But I'm gonna talk way more about that in week 6. But great questions, though. I love that question. I was just thinking about that today, actually. But okay, you guys, thanks for chiming in with me for an entire hour. I had a lot to talk about there. Have a fantastic rest of your week. And if you guys have any questions, you know where to find me.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.